Hi, I'm Vicki Hoth, Education Coordinator for Handi Quilter. Richard Ike has shown you how to install your Pro Stitcher on your machine. Now I'm ready to show you how to use your software. Let's get started. To engage the Pro Stitcher, you need to lower the levers. This is the main screen for your Pro Stitcher, and you'll notice in the bottom left corner that it says HQ Pro Stitcher for the Avante. If you have a 16, you will see that it says 16. If you have a Fusion, it will say Fusion. Okay, let's go through this main screen. First off, you'll see the crosshairs. That indicates where your needle position is in relationship to the design and the fabric below. You'll see here the width and the height of a design, and we don't have a design in here at this point, so everything is at 0. There's a help menu, and if I press any one of these buttons, it will tell me what that button does, and this is also exactly what comes right out of the manual, so you can also go back to your manual. If I press the half stitch, the needle drops into the down position. If I press it again, it drops in, or it raises. The full stitch does a full stitch, so it goes a full revolution. Reset home resets the home according to where the home spot is on the design. Refresh, and we'll get into that a little later, but it refreshes your screen, and this is a great tool, and you'll definitely want to use that. Pan is for panning the design around the screen, so you can grab the design and move it along the screen, and when we bring a design in, you'll be able to see that. Zoom zooms, enlarges, or reduces the size of your design. Grid, look at that, isn't that nice? We can zoom in on that, and you can actually, if there was a design there, that grid would get larger, but it's 1-inch grid. A ruler, so if I wanted to measure the design or if I wanted to measure the fabric, I can move my fabric or my needle to a certain point, and I would turn on the ruler. It starts at 0, and I can move it across, or one of the things that I could move it up and down, but one of the things that's really nice as well is I can find out my angle. So if I reset that and I move it at an angle, it gives me the measurement in inches of that angle that I have that I'm looking for. And then follow, and we'll use that a little later because it helps us follow the design on the fabric. And enable motors, so this will lock my machine so that I cannot move the machine, so it enables the motors. Disable the motors, and now I can move the machine. And if you want to get rid of the ruler, you just turn that off. If you want to not have the grid on there, you turn that off. Here's the X and the Y according to where it is in the pattern. Okay, the next button we're going to look at is the design button. First off, there are these 4 main menu buttons. So we have design, and when we drop that down, we have all of these functions. With our file, which is depressed, you can see that it's darker. That means that that's what I'm using right now. So if I open my file, there are all my designs, and right now I'm in the C drive. So if I want to do blocks, these are all blocks, and I can scroll up and see all of those blocks. Continuous line, corners, and triangles. So if we want to bring, say, a block in, we can choose any block. See all those designs? We're going to go ahead and choose the feather block, and I can either double click on that, double tap on it, or I can tap on it once and then press open, and that opens that design up. Now we have a blue box around, and that's the perimeter box. If I don't want to see that box, I can actually make it disappear by just pressing that and turning that off. If I don't want to see the start and stop, which is the green and the red, I can press that and they disappear. Now the jump points, that would be if I were using a continuous line and I had rows, and so I could get rid of the points or the lines for that. And if I want to get rid of the design, I can actually do that. So if you ever have a time when you bring in a design and it doesn't show up, make sure you check these boxes to make sure that everything is selected. If you want to change this design and then save it later, this is your Save button, so that's in File and Save. This is a copyright that tells you the information of the design. Updates, this is where you would go to do your updates, and then if you've changed, adjusted something and you want to reset all, there's your you reset everything. So that turns your skew off and all your functions off and just brings it back to the beginning. On this side we have an undo and a redo. So if you've done some action on your design, then you want to undo it, just go ahead and press the undo. And then there's a history. So if we press this history, at this point the only thing in our history is that we loaded the design. So it adds up, so you can always go back and undo those or reselect something in the history, and you can just turn that off. So if you want to purchase a design from a designer on the internet and download it onto your jump drive, then you need to put that in here, install that in, and I want to open the file. Do you want to save your current design? No. The C drive is what we've been working with, but I'm looking for another drive, and this is the D drive. Now you may find that it would be an E drive, so don't worry, you just want to find the next drive. So this is your C drive, this is where your designs are, moving down there. The D drive is where we're looking. The D drive also has all of your designs in it. That's your backup for your designs. And I've loaded another folder of designs. And so you can see those designs in there. If you don't want to use those, then we can go back to the C drive. You can find your designs, do the drop down, and there's your folder with your designs in it. So let's go back to blocks. Bring in that feather, and we'll just double tap on that, and there's your design again. And now the next tool we're going to use is area. We can create an area of the block on our fabric and place the design in it and skew it to fit. So if I were to go up to the top left and press to corner, go down to the bottom right and press to corner, it has created an area in my design. Now right now you'll see that the design is 8.07 by 8.02. Well, my box is that size, and so obviously it's got to be reduced to fit that area. So if I go to skew and align and I press the skew, it will skew it into that block area. Now let's reset that and go back to area. The next one we're going to use is multi-point, and that, if I use 4 points, the 4 points of my feather, if I go up to the block, press, and you can see across, it tells me what I'm doing. I'm adding a point. Now we're going to make this a little wonky. We're going to put it down there. Now you can see the 4 corners. Now I'm going to skew, and it's skewed within the purple, and you can see the purple was my area that I created, even though the blue box is the area of the true parameter of that, but it's skewed into the created area. If I want to, I can reset that again, and you can see, if I delete the design, you can see those 2 boxes. back to skew, and now I've created the size. This is a 4-point, when it says multi-point, to get that accurate 4 corners, you only can press that 4 times. If I want to create another area, say another place on my quilt and that may be different than that, I first have to delete or clear that area. Now by clearing that area, it placed my design back to its original size. If I wanted to keep that design the way it was, I'm going to actually undo that. If I wanted to keep that design that size and the way it is, then I would baseline it. Right over here is a button that's baseline, and that acts as a freeze. So it sets it as I have created it now. Okay, now if I clear my area, it has frozen that in that shape and size. You see up here the new size. The next function we're going to work with is rotation, and I brought in the cherries to demonstrate that function. So we're going to do rotation. Now with this, I can rotate this at a 45. I could do a minor, very minor, and even a very, very minor, a point or 1 degree or a 0.1 degree. I can mirror this. I can flip that. There's a 2-point start button and a group button that we will use in another function, so you'll understand how to use that later. The crop function we'll use at another time, so we'll show you how to do that. The repeat function, if we want to repeat this design, we can just press the plus. And as you can see, this is not a continuous line design, so you have a jump. And I can't see the whole design, but if I press refresh, it will put everything, the crosshairs and all the designs into the screen so you can see that. Now if I wanted to repeat rows, then I could add rows. If I wanted to have space between those rows, distance in the vertical, I could start adding distance. If I wanted them to overlap, I could press the negative and they would go into the negative, which, you know, for some things it works. The point to point and the stretch width and height we will show in another function so that it'll make sense to you. The fit we will also use when we create an edge to edge. If I want to reset this, it will reset it to the one design. So some of these functions, when they're grayed out, that you cannot use them until you have done another function, and we'll work that through. Resize. If I want to resize this, the width is 2.22, the height is 4.25. If I want to keep the aspect ratio, I'm going to lock that in, and then I can change that and say I want to do this 9 inches. Let's refresh it so you can see that. Now the size of this is 9 inches wide and 17 inches high, which is quite a large cherry. We're on the skew and align button, and we've used the skew before, so if I press the skew, it will skew it to the 4 sides. If I reset that, if I press the horizontal align, this will align it to the left, to the right, or I can align it to the center. If I want to align it to both sides, it will stretch it, but it's still outside of that box. So if I press the vertical alignment, it will align it to fit within the box. But if I don't want to distort it, I'm going to turn that off and turn that off, and then I could say I want to do a vertical top. There, how's that? Do you see how that refresh worked? So you can see that bigger. I'm going to align the bottom, or I could do a center, and so it centers it within that even though it doesn't fit within the area, or I could make it fit within that area. So that's my skew and align button. The freehand button is where you can go ahead and create your own freehand design. So you would want to clear the area, and then you can create whatever design by the movement of the machine and recording it. Another thing you can do also is you can use the mark button, and you can do mark your stitch in the ditch and actually create your own stitch in the ditch and let it stitch there. And you can jump from one area to another and stitch that, and we'll go into that later as well. Reposition button. We have the reposition 4 corners. So if I want to reposition this and move it up to the top of my block and say just position that to the top, it would reposition the block here, which is we're actually going to clear this area. It would reposition it up using that corner as my repositioning point. So we're going to go back to reposition. If I wanted to move over to the right corner over here and say reposition it to that corner, and the same with the bottom right and left. Maybe I want to use my centering point of my block for repositioning. So if I place the machine in the center of my block and press center, it places the center of the design in the center of the block. Maybe my start point is where I want to use to position. So I go where I want that start point to be and press start point, and it positions that. Remember, the needle and the crosshairs represent each other. The same with the end point. Maybe that's what I'm more important, there's my end point. Maybe I want it over here on my block, so I press end point and it places that in the end point position. Now, maybe I have this cherry that I want in a certain position. So if I take this up here and I grab maybe this point right here, this is very critical to position. I'm going to drag that, and by using my finger or a stylus, I can actually drag that over, or I'll move that back so you can see, or because I've pressed drag, I can actually move my crosshair over and it attaches itself to that design, and then I'll drop it and it drops it exactly where I want to go. Now once I've positioned that, maybe it's not quite right, I have some nudge buttons. So we placed a very small number in there, and we have these 4 nudge buttons that we can nudge it in the 4 different directions. We can nudge it forward, back, to right, or to left. The next function is our art and stitch, and if we press the art and stitch, we can actually go into art and stitch. And if you have registered your art and stitch on your tablet, then it will you'll be able to save the designs after you've manipulated them in there. If you haven't, then you'll need to do that on another computer. So this is telling us that we need to activate this, and since if it isn't activated, it will say output will be disabled, which means you cannot save anything on your art and stitch. Now if we bring a design in here and we work it and then we take it back in, just press that button. We have that open so that we can go back and forth. Great. There it is, there's the design. And now we'll go back. You can see it brought the design in. We can do some manipulating with that. Following your instructions on your art and stitch, you can learn how to use that. Now we've gone through all of the functions with the design. Now we'll go to the quilt functions, the quilt menu. And in the quilt menu, this is where you get to start quilting. You'll notice there's a run button down here. So if I were to press that, having had resized it and maybe repeated it and positioned it, once I press that run button, then with my functions here selected, then it will start quilting. And at this point, all of these are selected. If I don't want one of those selected, I just press it. That's the pull-up auto. That's the pull-up that you can do manually. Our tie-off on start and our tie-off end. So if we don't want those tie-offs on, you can turn all those buttons off. If you don't want to stitch, you can turn that off. But that's what we're all about, is stitching. So we want to stitch. And we could turn on, and maybe you don't like to use the auto. That's the automatic one, and we'll go into that a little later so you can see the difference between those two buttons. Okay, the next one is our status, and that just tells us that it's running. New, start and end, we can change and move the start and end on each one of those. So if I wanted to get rid of that cherry, I could take this and move that so that it would totally eliminate that cherry. And maybe I would even go a little further and eliminate that stem of that cherry. So if I just wanted that leaf, the loop, and that cherry, I have eliminated that part of the cherry. If I want to change the start, I can do the same thing, and maybe I want to eliminate both cherries and just have this loop and the leaf, and I can do that as well. If you want to move them back, you can do it that way. You can do little jumps this way, so it fine-tunes it. You can also type in a segment. Right now that says that start point is at line segment 7. If I move that back all the way to the beginning, it will go to 0. If I want to find a position and move my start point to that, so I'm going to move this crosshair and put the crosshair right there, and let's zoom in on this so you can see that. And I want to put that crosshair right on that point, and I want to change the stop point to that point. I moved it and then I turn it off and it locks it in, so you can see how I have now eliminated that. So there's different ways that you can move those stop and start points. Now if I refresh, that refreshes that to the screen so that I can see everything. If I want to move the stop point, go ahead and move it to the end.